The holidays are here, and so is the perfect way to bless your loved ones. The Crosswalk Holiday Gift Guide has something for everyone on your list. The team at Crosswalk has handpicked the best devotionals, picture books, middle grade fiction, and adult fiction, so that you can spend less time buying and more time giving to those you love most. So stuff these stories into your stockings and celebrate the wonder of reading this Christmas. Want our gift guide? Visit crosswalk.com/gift guide today.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation, as usual, as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about the mental change. We will.
Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking with Dr. Stephen G. Post, who's been a guest with us before. I think last time was 2022, and we did a program on the deeply forgetful people, which is our peeps in, the dementia and Alzheimer's circle. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with him, he is renowned around the world for his work on the effects and types of love and how that can make us a better person and a better care partner as well. And if you just read the foreword from his book, which is written by His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, that in itself will tell you where this conversation is going and where his newest book, Pure Unlimited Love, Science and the Seven Paths to Inner Peace. And who the heck does not need inner peace? So let's go talk with him. I just can't wait. I don't want to say any more. I just want to talk with this man. I absolutely adore him, and I know you will too. And you're going to walk away with a lot of tips that'll make your life much easier, much better, and more profound. Well, Stephen, I am so excited to have you on the show. It's been, I think, since 2022 when you were on last, and you have such incredible insights to help us care and live our lives better. And so I'm thrilled to be able to talk to you about all of your work regarding love and the science of it. I think most of us kind of blow off the science and don't think it's connected, and how it really makes a difference in our body and how we react and how others react to us. So thank you again for being with us. Your new book, Pure Unlimited Love, I'm going to put that up here.
There it
is absolutely fantastic. And I'm like I said, I can't wait to dive into, your seven principles that you have for us to follow there. Mm-hmm. But why don't you kind of introduce yourself a little bit in terms of, who is Stephen G. Post?
Who is Stephen G. Post? Well, his grandfather divorced Emily. That's the truth. And she did tell me not to put my peas on my fork with my thumb. So I think that made me a little bit antinomian. But at any rate, I'm a professor now at Stony Brook University Renaissance School of Medicine in New York. I had been a professor for 20 years at Case Western Medical School, and before that in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the University of Chicago. So I've been teaching around medical schools for a long, long time. Although I'm not an MD, I teach humanism, compassionate care, and bioethics. And in that period, I've been focused mostly on what I call the deeply forgetful person, people who have memory problems. I don't like the word dementia, as you know, because I think it's derogatory and invites negative metaphors, husk shell gone. And plus, politicians these days call their adversaries demented, which I
Mhm.
don't particularly appreciate. So I find that love is the core value, and love for the deeply forgetful is love's greatest test. So anybody who can maintain that sort of affective clarity and concern and love for people with quote unquote dementia deserves a lot of credit. So that's important to me. But I've been writing on the theme of love since I was a student at the University of Chicago in the 70s, wrote a dissertation on spirituality and love. And that's always informed at a certain level my thinking about people who are deeply forgetful, that we need to love them and incorporate them in our communities just like anyone else.
Oh, I totally agree. I'd like you to dive a little bit deeper into that because I think it just sets the stage for everybody here on Alzheimer's Speaks, and just it's so useful in all different areas of our life as well. But why do you think it's so important to really incorporate that love? If you can go in a little bit deeper understanding of that.
Well, for a lot of reasons. First of all, people who are deeply forgetful still have a lot of emotional sensitivity, and they can pick up whether a primary or a secondary caregiver is emotionally caring and loving. They can pick it up very quickly, and it will affect the interactions a lot. So I think that in the end, it's love for deeply forgetful people that really saves the day. I tell a story in my earlier book, A Dignity for Deeply Forgetful People, about a geriatric mental asylum in the middle of Ohio, in Mount Vernon, Ohio. And there was a unit there that was devoted to people with Down syndrome who had become demented, which is fairly commonplace after age 50. And their behavior becomes fairly erratic and unpredictable. So I was there with the great neurologist friend of mine, Joseph Michael Foley, and we were observing this, and we didn't think there was anything we could really do. But then, lo and behold, in walked these Hindu nurses' aides from a little community in central Ohio, and they were totally devoted to these individuals. And when they walked in the unit, the people with this dual diagnosis quieted down beautifully, Lori. They just became peaceful and melancholy. And we decided that we didn't understand this. So we asked a couple of these aides to come out to lunch with us to a pizza restaurant of all places in Gambier, Ohio. And we asked them what motivated them to be so diligent and so soft in their caring, so patient, caring for these individuals. And they said, Namaste. And Namaste is what the Hindus use as a greeting, but it's not like hi or hello. It means I honor the divine essence in you as you honored it in me. And it really has something to do with resilience as well. So that you assume within everybody, no matter how deeply forgetful they may have become, there is a deep, profound essence of divine resilience that is within them. And our job is to cultivate that. So I love the idea of loving deeply forgetful people. And I think that the alternative is abuse. I mean, look at what happened in Germany with the hypothermia experiments that were torturous. Look at what goes on in the political discourse when we use the word dementia in the most negative, horrific, damning ways. So I think that we have to really turn that around. And in the end, the answer is always going to be love.
Yeah, I so agree. And it's so it's so profound. My mom lived with dementia for 30 years, and the journey beside her was so life-giving to me. And you always hear about being a caregiver and doing everything, and it sets up the expectation we're not going to receive anything back, but they are in there. You see that glint in their eye and the small. You start looking for the smaller little things that really are the essence of who we are and why we're attracted to one another or feel comfortable with one another. It's unbelievable. And you can use that love, looking at things differently, giving people some grace for not being perfect, because none of us are. And yet people seem to up the ante of it has to be perfect now when it wasn't prior. And we really self-sabotage. And I think the advertising doesn't help either, because they use fear to make money.
They sure do. So, when I was a little kid, my grandmother, who was a writer of some note in American culture, she passed away of what was probable Alzheimer's disease, although back in those days, it was just known as senile dementia. And I would go into the nursing home from time to time, and I would do assisted oral feeding with her. This was before the 1980s, so before they ever used feeding pegs in anybody with dementia. They would just basically do assisted oral feeding, and that could mean applesauce or bran or whatever it might be. And I enjoyed doing that. I would walk into her room and, she couldn't remember who I was, which didn't matter to me. I think we attach much too much significance to name retention. I mean, why is that important? But, she would connect with me in this ritualistic experience. I could feel her emotional presence. She could light up with a smile. Sometimes her smile was so electric that the place could be on fire. And, I felt that she was all there, although her cognitive skills were diminished. But underneath all of that loss, Grandma Post was still fully human and fully there and creative at times. And so I felt that who was I to write her off and to think of her as somehow less significant in this universe than I am. I have a very good friend from Cleveland whose sister passed away of Alzheimer's about 4 years ago. And he was up in Detroit with her. And I called him up on the phone and I said, "Pastor, do you think your sister's still there?" He said, "Well, she's near the end, but who am I to say she's gone? How can I say that? For all I know, she's one step ahead of me and already got a foot down at the train station on that blessed train bound for glory." And I think sometimes people with dementia, spirituality, have more new insights into human interactions, into the spiritual side of life. I've seen this, I've written about it. They get freed up from some of these very negative social constructs. Everything has to be done as a transaction. It doesn't, in fact, but there are people who believe that. And so I think that we have a lot to learn from them. And oftentimes they become calmer and more soothing later on with dementia. They forget about the tit for tat mythologies and they become more compassionate.
This Christmas, give more than just a gift. Give encouragement, inspiration, and joy. In the Crosswalk Holiday Gift Guide, you'll discover a curated collection of meaningful books and devotionals that celebrate faith, family, and the real reason for the season. This Christmas, we invite you to share comfort, quiet, or excitement with each person on your gift list. From beautifully illustrated Bibles and devotionals to novels and picture books, this guide holds the perfect book for every reader. including yourself. So stuff those stories into stockings, wrap collections with care, tuck a book or two into your own nightstand, and join us in celebrating the wonder of reading this Christmas. Explore the Crosswalk Holiday Gift Guide and find something special for everyone on your list. Visit crosswalk.com/gift guide today.
Yeah, I always said, with my mom, the ego left the building. And
Yeah.
so she wasn't, she didn't worry about what other people thought or what how they looked at her. It wasn't there. She was able to be her true, authentic self. And though it might be different than the world prior that we lived, where we could sit and have a solid conversation and things like that, I could still get this peacefulness from her. I could tell when she was happy or sad or frustrated.
Yeah.
It just showed up in different ways. And I think so many of us forget about all of our multisensory connection, which is most of our communication. We just get so used to talking all the time. And there is this peacefulness that's taught when you go to that level. And I always said, and I don't know if you believe this, and I've never really written it down, and I wish I would have when I was caring, but I felt like there were levels of unconditional love. Like before, I just thought it was unconditional love. I have a child, or, I'm married, or, whatever it is, good friend, that you would just do anything for that person. But that's just like the tip of the iceberg.
It is. So, in this book, Pure Unlimited Love, with the last foreword written by His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, because he's now 90 or 91, and no one thinks he's going to be writing any more forewords. So I'm honored to have that here. And he understands this about people who are deeply forgetful. He looks at the Western world, where we're so hyper-cognitive in our value system. You are valued as a human being because of your linear rationality, your ability to get from point A to point B, to operationalize plans. However, there is also symbolic rationality, which is to say that so many people very, very deep into this illness, even to the very end, they still connect with, say, a hat they always wore, or a rosary bead if they're Catholic. And if they go to a little church service, I know one woman who did that, and she was at Yale University. She was quite severely forgetful. She couldn't talk with anybody, but when she went to that little Yale Sunday service, she would chime in to the deeply learned hymns that she remembered from youth. She would appreciate the prayers that she'd been saying all of her life. And she would be inspired by the stained glass windows. And then afterwards, people testified that she would be more like her old self for 5 or 10 minutes and might even engage in coherent conversation. So somehow all those symbols brought her back to her identity, which was never gone, but was opaque. It was in the background, but we can never think that someone is not there. And love, so what is love? I don't mean love of chocolate or love of designer jeans, but I mean love in the sense that the security and well-being of another is as real to you or meaningful to you, and sometimes even more so, as is your own. And so we need to work as a culture, as families, as individuals. The big question is, how can we love deeply forgetful people? And there's such a rise in the number of individuals with dementia secondary to any number of illnesses. We really need to practice that and make it part of how we think and feel. And this is not just an intellectual thing, but it's got to come down to the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel as though love has become much more relevant to the human future than ever before for all kinds of reasons. One of which is the fact that we have to encounter and help and work with deeply forgetful individuals.
Well, and I think, when you look at you, when you were explaining about the little lady in the church, how many times do you yourself, and I'm saying this to the audience because I know you get this, when do you feel the most comfortable? When you resonate with your surroundings, when you feel safe and you can just kind of breathe in and you don't have to worry about someone commenting about you and hurting you. And I think of all the times we tell people, that are forgetful, that they have a problem, they're a behavior, they're in my way, they're a burden. And maybe not using words, but in all of our expressions. And how would that make you feel? Getting all those side communications, you're not going to feel authentic. You're not going to feel safe. And all it does is create chaos. And I mean, we just look out our window or turn on the TV and we can see the chaos of everyone thinking the other guy's not as good as their side. And, that competition, that right and wrong, that feeling we're perfect and none of us are perfect versus looking inside and going, gosh, I do a good job, but I am far from perfect.
Yeah.
And so why would I put that pressure on someone who is ill? I mean, that's just an asinine thought process when you think about it.
Yes, that's the word for it. Spirituality is about engaging imperfection.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that from infancy to old age. So we need to get used to that idea. I think that there's so many things to be said about the consciousness of deeply forgetful people. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, doesn't believe in our Western highly rationalistic, hypercognitive value system,
Mm-hmm.
which led directly to the hypothermia experiments on the part of the Nazis in the late 1930s. People with dementia or with developmental disabilities were taken out of asylums in a program called T4 in Munich. And for a year and a half, they were left to freeze, mostly overnight, in vats of cold water, in piles of snow. And then they would be brought back into the asylums and thawed out, quote unquote, in different mediums at different temperatures. And of course, that didn't do them any good because they were already dead. And so, this idea that somehow you are of no value, you are life unworthy of life, you are a useless eater because you have a cognitive disability, I think is horrifying. I totally disagree with it. And yet I do think that it is commonly held. So we need to
Yeah.
change that. We need to completely change the culture around deeply forgetful people.
Yeah, I agree. I think of, like my support groups. One of the things that people ask for the most is, I want more patience. And to me, our impatience come from our preconceived standards, our timing of tasks, our belief that it has to be done a certain way. And yet, when we set ourselves up to be more flexible, more of an ability to learn through that flexibility of change and be
Mhm.
more accepting of that, then we become more creative and we can really preserve the presence of the person and of ourselves.
And
Everything
of
just
ourselves.
becomes, everything becomes calmer. And it's not a burden. It's just something that, and again, not everybody wants to be a caregiver, but it just allows us to do it in a more loving way. I think we put so much pressure on ourselves because we feel others are, kind of stalking us and seeing how we're doing and what we're doing. And again, our fast paced lives are, again, in my opinion, asinine. I mean, we are going, and we don't take
Yeah.
time, for the silence, which is
Yeah.
which is critical, and those quiet times.
Yeah. And so we don't notice
Mhm.
the continuing self-identity of people who are deeply forgetful. You have to slow down and you have to be willing to observe carefully and take note. And that's so rewarding and so important. We did a national study through the Gallup organization of 4,000 primary caregivers in the United States for people with dementia. And we found out that about half of them were inspired by episodes of unexpected lucidity in their loved ones. And if that sounds like a funny idea, well, the National Institute of Health is now funding scientific studies on what they like to call paradoxical lucidity.
Mhm.
So if someone's been looking long gone and suddenly they come back into themselves, what does that mean? Is that just some little bit of neurological tissue firing off? Or does that suggest that underneath this brain issue, there is a soul? I can use that word. And I think that there is. I've never been convinced in my entire journey that people with dementia are gone. I knew Sir John Eccles at the University of Chicago, who won the Nobel Prize for figuring out how brain cells communicate at the synapses.
Mhm.
He was a very great man. And he said, just remember, brain does not explain mind.
Mhm.
So they can show you all those pictures of neurological plaques, tangles, hippocampal atrophy, and so forth. But brain does not explain mind any more than you can get blood out of a stone, was his argument. And most philosophers of mind agree with that. They think that mind is really something metaphysically different, philosophically. It's just different than matter. So all the great spiritual traditions say mind before matter.
Mhm.
And matter probably comes from mind, not the reverse, which I firmly believe. That's why so many people in the Hindu tradition speak about non-local mind
Mhm.
and why it is, the neurologist in Germany, Berger, who discovered brain waves, um, the reason he got interested in wave activity in the brain, which people thought was crazy at the time, this is in World War I, was because he was run over on the battlefield, almost killed, and his older sister had a premonition about this and told his dad. And so he wondered as he went to medical school how it was that this happened. And he came up with the idea of, you might have heard this, alpha waves,
Mhm.
which are also called Berger waves. And that only happened because a fellow had a sense that there was more mystery to human connection than we often realize. And so people with dementia, they may not have linear rationality in the sort of easy means end sense of the term, but they have rationality in lots of other ways. I mean, the artist Wilhelm de Kooning was diagnosed and he had probable Alzheimer's for 14 years. And for 13 and a half of those years, he painted. And he would just sporadically rise up and dip his brush in the acrylic paint, go up to the easel, and he would paint. And it was different than what he did when he was, shall we say, in his prime, but it was also more profound.
Mhm.
So I think we really have to make room for these individuals in our lives, in our society, and we can't just write them off.
This Christmas, give more than just a gift. Give encouragement, inspiration, and joy. In the Crosswalk Holiday Gift Guide, you'll discover a curated collection of meaningful books and devotionals that celebrate faith, family, and the real reason for the season. This Christmas, we invite you to share comfort, quiet, or excitement with each person on your gift list. From beautifully illustrated Bibles and devotionals to novels and picture books, this guide holds the perfect book for every reader, including yourself. So stuff those stories into stockings, wrap collections with care, tuck a book or two into your own nightstand, and join us in celebrating the wonder of reading this Christmas. Explore the Crosswalk Holiday Gift Guide and find something special for everyone on your list. Visit crosswalk.com/gift guide today.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, it sounds sad, but how lucky he was run over to be able to have that breakthrough with his sister. I mean, you think of how much things have changed because of that. It's unbelievable.
Yes, it is. It's very much the case. And everybody who's done any primary caregiving, so half of primary caregivers can explain in detail these moments of lucidity that they have noticed and been inspired by. It turns out in our Gallup study that 90% of those who have had these experiences view it positively. Somehow it's inspiring for them. They know that grandma is still there. She's not gone. And she's still part of one mind, of the consciousness, if you will. So she's never reduced to nothing and should never be abused because she's still a human being in the deepest sense of the term. And so I fully believe that. And I think that they have people with dementia can be immensely creative. They can be a lot more purposeful in their creativity than we are aware of. For example, the guy who came into a elder healthcare art program in Cleveland when I was there for 20 years. It's a long time. I loved Cleveland, by the way, for all you Clevelanders. I also loved Minneapolis. I love the Midwest. I don't know what to say about New York. So I'm here 17 years, but I'm not going to stay here forever. I won't die here because I think it's important to be in an environment where people slow up a little bit and connect more meaningfully. And that helps a great deal in our own ability to thrive. So I'm working now on positive psychology and dementia. In other words, positive psychology is a field that came along in 2000. It's not studying disease-based psychology like depression or bipolar, but it's studying those psychological states that seem to enhance or contribute to our well-being. And that means kindness. First chapter of this book is, may you give and glow.
Mm-hmm.
The second chapter, may you heal with kindness. There's so much to be said, and I've been studying this for 30 years, on how giving with kindness helps us to be happier, to be healthier, and to live even longer lives. So we need to recognize that positive psychology, including mirth, is not just for people who are cognitively intact.
I was just going to add for that everyday experience, like if you go pick up a coffee and someone ahead of you buys your coffee, I mean, you're just like, it changes your whole day. And then you want to do it for the next guy. And, and the guy who rolls off, thinks that felt good. So everybody, and then the barista who's delivering it, they feel good, and they'll even tell the next car what just happened. And it's this ripple effect that I don't think people give enough thought to in terms of the importance. And it's very simple. I mean, sometimes it's just a hello, or
Yes.
letting somebody go first. It doesn't have to cost money. It has just this huge ripple effect and affects so many and can change your whole day.
Yes, and it can change the whole day for someone who is deeply forgetful.
Mm-hmm.
Also, mirth is important for these people. So, my friend uh, in Cleveland died of probable Alzheimer's, and I went to see him the night before he died. And he had told me all kinds of wonderful Irish jokes, not derisive ones, but positive ones. And now he couldn't remember any of his jokes and he couldn't converse. So I told him the jokes that he used to tell me walking down the streets of Greater Cleveland. So, what's the Irish definition of hospitality? He couldn't answer. You make someone feel perfectly at home while you be a wishing they were. And then he just cracked up because he still had that attitude of hilariousness within his soul. And that never goes. And it's very important immunologically. There's a program at UCLA on laughter and psychoneuroimmunology. So these people look like they're just sitting there passively, medical model. But if you can break through with tasteful humor, and it is possible to do that, but it takes practice, and you have to know who you're talking with. It's great for them. It's great for you too. So I'm a big believer in mirth, and I think that we need to use all the techniques of positive psychology to help these people. So for me, these are all expressions of love. I'm just looking at my wheel of love in this book. Creativity. People with dementia can be extremely creative. Uh, Listening, celebration. They can love a good birthday party. Mirth, forgiveness, helpfulness, compassion, carefrontation, a word I take from M. Scott Peck, who wrote The Road Less Traveled. I mean, you can actually, in some instances, meaningfully correct individuals with dementia and help them to get on course with their traditional self.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's so much opportunity with these individuals, but we don't connect them with these positive states.
Well, and I think so much of it is we haven't been trained. I mean, we've been trained and educated that dementia is going to be difficult. It's going to be a burden. It's gonna take from us. And I still go to so many educational programs, and it's just like there's a lighter side here.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
fun, there's an interconnectiveness. I have a thing called Dementia in the Arts that I do with Mary Crescenzo, who's a master artist out in California. And you were talking about how creative they can be and artistic. And what we do is Mary actually teaches, and she's got a play. She does all kinds of stuff. But we just interview people with dementia, and they talk about their art. And some of these people have been living 10 and 20 years, with dementia. Some have never done art. Some have done art all their life. But every single one of them has said, when I get in the zone of doing my art, just feeling the ability to be free and creative and not looked down on, their symptoms, they say, just melt away. And then their
Yeah.
caregiver has to almost drag them to go eat or go to bed because they're having so much fun. And life is really good in that
Yeah.
zone. But we have been taught they're not capable, they're not able, they would never know how to do that. And, we believe what we're told way too often, even when our gut is telling us different. And then I think our ego gets in the way of trying because, oh, what if they were right? And I did try, and then I look like a fool for trying to step forward. And I think we have to, I think we have to follow our guts and our intuition so
Mhm.
much more. But in order to do that, we have to quiet down and also kind of dispel that it's a failure. No, it's a learning lesson. If it doesn't work, maybe tweak it. Maybe you don't do it. Maybe you try something else. But, you know, giving up shouldn't be an option, or shutting down. Because when we shut down, we shut them down. And then yet we still have these expectations that they should
Yeah.
be able to converse. And it's like, hello, they're mirroring us and what we believe in.
Mhm. Oh, I think that's so accurate. I'm a big believer in the underlying meaning that we are not detecting in the artwork of people who are deeply forgetful.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a wonderful story I read about a guy who would come into the art studio every morning and he could never converse. Chin was down, um, no conversation, but he could take a crayon and he could draw lines on a piece of paper. And the lines were fairly chaotic, but there were two lines, parallel lines down the middle, that he came back to and drew repeatedly week after week. And so one day he blurted out without any solicitation, completely spontaneous. He said, "This is a map for my daughter to get to my house."
Oh,
And so a lot of times there's more meaning in what they're doing than we think.
mm-hmm.
And therefore we pretty much condemn them in a certain sense. But there is meaning in a lot of their activities, and we need to train ourselves to notice that meaning and to pick it up and then to capitalize on it.
Yeah. I would love to see communities and clinics gather some of that artwork and just put it in a frame. You can put you can go ahead and do something of art, and I'll use myself as an excuse and think, oh, that's horrible. You put it in a frame, it pops, and it develops a conversation and a life of its own.
Yeah.
And it allows people to not be so scared. My daughter was in the activities director for a long time, and she would get shamed for putting, they didn't have a budget for frames, and so they would, tape them up on the windows and do different things, and the residents were all really proud of their artwork,
Mhm.
but administration shamed them and said you can't do that. And it's like, you're not looking deep enough at what this is and how these people feel about their artwork. And so, I get frustrated when I go into communities and clinics where, they're renting or purchasing artwork when it's readily available and will be given freely. And it could have such an impact on people visiting, going, wow, look at what they did. And that all
Yeah.
levels of art are acceptable and should be, people should be proud of whatever it is.
Yeah, and I think that to the extent possible, uh, assisted living, quote unquote, nursing homes should be within the general vicinity of an art museum
Mhm.
because people who are resident in these institutions can go and enjoy a painting. And in a small group with the right kind of facilitation, it can bring them back into themselves. They can have lively conversations about a Rembrandt or whatever it might be. And it's a very beautiful thing. That's happening quite widely. So we have to recognize that these are individuals who still have creative hearts and minds, not linear minds necessarily, but they can understand the significance of beauty or awe. Uh, they can grow and develop, and they can master art appreciation, even in the deepest moments of forgetfulness.
Well, and you can see that in their eyes if they can't communicate anymore. You
Right.
can tell, if something brings them peace or excitement or fear or whatever it might be, or maybe it takes them back in time. But you can
Yes.
read that in their body language if you allow that. And
Mhm.
sometimes you'll get those lucid moments where something will come out.
Right.
And we have a little it's a small museum here in Shoreview, Minnesota, the Cat Museum, and they have a dementia friendly tour that they do, and they're so powerful. And oh my gosh, the gal who runs them is just amazing in terms of bringing out the person with dementia and the care partners. It's something they can do together, which a
Yeah.
lot of times people miss and think, well, like, we can't go there, we wouldn't fit in. And everybody fits in, and no comments are wrong, no questions are wrong, because beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and each one of us has a different set of eyes, and so we're going to look at things different, and that's perfectly acceptable. And those conversations are so powerful. Even when Mary and I look at the artist's work, one person will see one thing, another person will see another thing, and then it just expands what's before you, and it's powerful to all of us, looking
Yeah.
at that piece. It's very cool.
Yeah. Art and also music, of course, is very important. Um, Getting people out into nature is wonderful. And in the book, Your Unlimited Love, the sixth of the seven paths to inner peace is to cherish the gift of nature. We have to get back to nature. So many times now, our children are being gobbled alive by technology, and it's very threatening to them. They talk about AI psychosis now. There's a lot in the newspapers about this. There are some 14 or 15 teenagers who have killed themselves with AI because the AI doesn't love anybody. It's just a machine. And it can go through this kind of cognitive reflection with a person and then leave them suggesting suicide. And so Google is actually being sued currently for this. And I think it's an important problem. So we have to get the kids out of the uh, high tech and more appreciative of nature and of one another for sure. And I think the same thing can be said for people with dementia. They also can be taken out of this artificial world and they can connect with each other in a more beautiful way.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
In real life.
Yeah, I totally agree. When I sold real estate, we used to sit down and meet with people, and then technology came about. And then it was like, oh, everything's going to be high tech. You're going to cut your meetings in half, maybe a quarter. You're going to save all this time. And it's like, I never did that because people weren't accepting and they didn't really understand how to maneuver it. And B, they still wanted that human touch, that authenticity.
Yeah.
And so I think with our kids, and I don't think COVID helped, when they were doing stuff online all the time, but even years and years with the games, people have, dove into that, and they don't know how to talk. They're scared of eye contact. They don't know how to respond. They won't answer a voicemail because they only text. They don't like email. I mean, there's so many things that they don't like. Their world, even though they think it's gotten bigger, has gotten much smaller.
It
And
has.
so we have to be very careful with all of our humans, but especially those, that are forgetful. They need a much more tender heart. And I know even in the communities, they're starting to do a lot of things with the robots. And I'm like, that's okay to a point. But one of the things that I found missing in touring for a loved one is the human connection. And everything is so task oriented and has to be timed. And if it's
Yeah.
not timed, then, and it's not documented that it's done, within a certain time frame, that's not real life. I mean, how many times do you have stuff on your schedule and you got to adjust it because
That's right.
something pops up? And if you're dealing with any form of dementia for yourself or a loved one or a friend or a coworker or a neighbor, we have to adjust.
Yeah.
We would want to be adjusted to be
Yeah.
included.
Yeah. You have to put aside the temporal glue between past and present and future, and mostly live in the pure present.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be done and done effectively. So this is a book about pure, unlimited love. It's not just human love. It's got a spiritual dimension to it. So I will tell you that one of my colleagues here, who had been the head of family medicine for a long time, he's fairly mystical. And I think people with dementia, at least a fair percentage of them, are quite mystical. They're maybe a little closer to the divine than we are because we're running around every day as fast as we can from point A to point B. But I think that my friend said, "What is unlimited love?" He said, "It is the first thing that you see when you close your eyes for the last time, hopefully." That says a lot. So
It
that's
says
the
an
more
awful lot.
metaphysical side of pure unlimited love. It's not just a human set of interactions. It also has something to do with the cosmos in which we cohabitate. So I thought that was very, very beautiful and very relevant because look, I've known people with severe dementia who have been incredibly versatile spiritually. I mean, that literature is vast. People who have spent a lot of time, not just in churches or in synagogues or wherever, but people who have cultivated an active spirituality that they never had earlier on in life. So somehow that was disinhibited under the conditions of dementia. I mean, I got a call from an organization in New York, the New York Society of Widows and Widowers, and they asked me to come in and give a talk about a paper that we'd written. And the paper claimed that and showed that people with, shall we say, widows and widowers who had been without their spouses for a number of years, they would go through a period of grief and bereavement. And that period would always go more quickly and more lastingly if they could self-report helping others in their environment. And so I was called into a hotel in New York, and I gave this talk, and at the end there was Q&A, and there was a guy in the back who was frantically waving his hands. And he said, "I don't care what you say, buddy. I don't do nothing for nothing." So that kind of transactional attitude is so limiting And it really puts people with dementia in the wastebasket. So we need to get beyond that. Some of our own attitudes are so destructive. We just need to settle down and recognize the value of all human beings without exception.
Well, in transactional, what he's missing is, and how I'm interpreting this, and this might be wrong, is that he's going to get paid. Well, there's many ways to get paid. There's that lift in your spirit that you did something good. That's a huge payment, and you can't buy that. But again, we don't teach that. I don't think near enough. The
Right.
power of kindness, and yet when you ask somebody who's a giving person, they always say they get more back than what they give.
Yeah.
That's what I typically hear from people anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in the Gospels, if I might say,
Mhm.
I mean, Jesus tells us to love our enemies. So I don't have any enemies that I'm aware of. I have adversaries, and I believe that they're in my life to bring out the best in me. But I don't think of them as my enemies. And if I try to think about who is my enemy, it becomes very artificial very quickly. So I think the great test case for love, Christian love, and unlimited love in general, is love for deeply forgetful people. Because if
Mhm.
you can master that, then you've done very well. You have to be mindful. You have to be deliberative. You have to be meditational. You have to envision all these incredible situations that might arise over the course of the day that are sporadic and unanticipated. So I think that there's nothing better in the practice of love than spending time around deeply forgetful people. And they will, by the way, just because they're so much in the present moment, they will take you out of that chronological dictatorship that keeps you on edge and running from point A to point B round the clock because they're not doing that. And you can't do that and be around them.
Yeah. Well, and they don't judge. That was one thing with my mom, and not that she was a very judging person. We were always super, super close, but I always felt 100% accepted in her presence. And
Yes.
that's a rare, anyways, it is for me to feel accepted. I don't care if I'm going shopping or, even if I'm with a circle of friends or if I'm speaking, I think there's always that inner critic going,
Right.
you screwed that
Right.
up or you should have done it different. And, kind of self-sabotaging stuff. And yet I think I'm a pretty positive, confident person. I
Yeah.
know that's still there within me, but I remember, and I try to explain to people one of the safest places for me to be, especially at the end of my mom's journey, that became very noticeable to me was how peaceful I could be just sitting next to her, not saying a word.
Right.
Just, it just brings you down and eases the burden of all of life, because you're feeling the essence of one another, and that's a beautiful thing. And again, I think in our fast-paced life, it easily gets overlooked.
It sure does. It sure does. So you continue to do beautiful work, and I'm always absolutely delighted to interact with you. And I'm looking forward to 3 or 4 years from now. We'll be a little older, but let's make a point of reconnecting.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Like I said, I could talk to you all day long, and just I have to work at keeping my mouth quiet, because you're so filled with so many things that I resonate with and that I learned from you. So I
Yeah.
can't really state how much I appreciate you taking the time with us here on
No.
Alzheimer's Speaks. It's absolutely wonderful, and I know my audience will be just as inspired as I am. Now we will have all of Dr. Poe's contact information in the notes. And so you can easily access, he's got a ton of books that he's written. But again, today we've been talking about the pure unlimited love, science, and the 7 paths to inner peace. And who the heck doesn't want inner peace?
Yeah. More than happiness. Happiness has been so overused,
Mm-hmm.
and people have such silly definitions of happiness. But inner peace is the way to go. And happiness will be a side effect, a byproduct of that inward state. By the way, His Holiness in the introduction, he comments, there is still much work to be done in this area, but I'm pleased to see Dr. Post addressing themes such as consciousness and interconnectedness in his new book. People who have dementia have as much consciousness as you and I. And for His Holiness, it's consciousness that gives us moral status or standing or
Mm-hmm.
consideration. It's not linear rationality, it's consciousness. So a person with dementia can be perfectly conscious of the autumn leaves, or of the beautiful sky, or of the smell of apple pie, or of the beauty of a piece of music. So consciousness is really much more important than rationality. And that means that so many of our great Western philosophers, like Kant and John Locke and many others, who basically said that unless we have that functioning linear rationality, we don't really merit much credibility under the moral umbrella of do no harm. I mean, that's a real problem. And whenever you see people who are deeply forgetful being harmed, that's typically the reason. We just don't quite measure up to their standards of rational behavior.
Yeah, well, when you talked about consciousness too, getting back to dementia chats that I do, and which is conversations with people living, with forgetfulness and dementia in the arts, they all talk about how colors are more vivid, how sounds are more striking, everything is elevated compared to what they saw and felt with their surroundings before. And, when I first heard that the first time, I was like, well, that's interesting. And then I thought of, well, when someone's blind, they talk about how their other senses kick into gear. And to me, this is kind of the same thing. And you also mentioned earlier on about being purposeful. Many of them say they've never felt so purposeful in their life.
Want to keep God's word with you wherever you go? The King James Bible Study KJV app by Salem Media makes it easy to read, study, share, and pray daily with the timeless KJV translation. Enjoy features like offline access, audio Bible listening, smart search, and tools to highlight, bookmark, and take notes, all designed to keep your Bible study simple and organized. Best of all, it's free to download in the Google Play Store. Growing your faith every day. Search for King James Bible Study KJV and download the app today.
Because all of the false purposes, the superficial purposes, have gone away.
Mm-hmm.
And they can just focus on the things that are most important, like loving kindness, for example. And that does happen. I've seen people who I think became much kinder. I knew a guy in Cleveland who'd been diagnosed with Alzheimer's and was quite severely affected by it. And he'd never done anything to help others that his family could remember. But now he would ride shotgun in the van and bring other older adults in from Shaker Heights to the Foley Elder Health Care Center. And he would escort them up and down the pathways into the door. It was wonderful to see him. And so somehow or another, his forgetfulness disinhibited his kindness. Because, a lot of times we're told, don't be kind, keep your fists clenched, be tough, don't be kind. But when all of those negative myths evaporate, all you have left to fall back on is your kindness.
Yeah. Well, and we've been taught don't be kind, you can't trust, you're going to get used. I mean, and, granted, that is going to happen along the way, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen every single time. It's a moment. Everything isn't perfect. Everything isn't going to be exactly as it was the last time.
Yeah.
But you have to believe in, I think, the greater good and the betterment of humankind, and the power of that, and once you reach that peaceful place that you were talking about, that consciousness, it's just life changing. Because anyways, for me, I didn't know how hectic I was, because it was just the normal, and people would kind of pat you on the back for being busy, and then you find this peacefulness. I remember going to, where the heck was it? I think it was in Missouri. And I went on a retreat, and it was beautiful. We had one day that was just, it was probably a day and a half of just quiet. No one talked, just a silence, but we did a lot of spiritual things out there. We had a lot of alone time while we were there. It took me 2 weeks to readjust to the big, crazy world. I mean, because I wanted that peacefulness again. I had never felt that type of serenity until I went there. It was really profound to me.
Yeah, and people who are deeply forgetful can achieve serenity and tranquility. Now, about a third of them will have serious behavioral problems, at least for a phase, but that will phase out as well. And we cannot judge their state of consciousness. They may be in a pretty good place. It's just like we can't judge a child with autism when they're repeating an action. They call it stimming. They may be perfectly happy setting up those dominoes and then knocking them down and setting them up again and knocking them down. I've written a big article about happiness and autism. And I think we need to start thinking about happiness for people who are deeply forgetful. They can be happy too. We just have to acknowledge that and try to encourage it.
Yeah. Well, and when you talked about behavior, I don't even like using that word. I like to call it a reaction or a clue. I mean, if we got a chronic illness, we would probably have some negative reactions that other people don't like or don't want to be around or don't want to deal with. Why shouldn't they be able to do that at times, And then if we're trying to keep putting them in a box to not feel, that's not healthy for anybody. Instead of validating their feelings and having that compassionate connection that they so deserve,
Right.
From us in terms of listening. Well, we do need to wrap up. Like I said, I could talk to you forever and ever. Is there any last words that you would like to add on that we haven't covered?
I do have a favorite quote. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. That's from Eleanor Roosevelt. And our dream is for a world where people who are deeply forgetful can be honored and respected and loved. And love is what will get us there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need to start talking about that explicitly, not just in terms of relationships in a nursing home that somehow break boundaries, but deeper things than that. We need to get very deep. And our places of worship, they have room for the kids who can shriek out and cry and be obnoxious in any kind of way, but they're still just babies.
Mm-hmm.
We could also make more room, I think, in our places of worship for people who are deeply forgetful.
So agree.
So I'm happy to be a guest on your wonderful program. And I think you do a beautiful service to all of America.
Thank you so much, especially around the holiday season, to take your time to be with us today. I so believe in the work that you do. And again, everybody, go out and purchase his book, Pure Unlimited Love. science and the 7 paths of inner peace. We all need that inner peace. And this will help you dealing with the deeply forgetful. And it'll help you with yourself and your family and your friends and everybody else, because there's such a ripple effect to his profound teachings in his books. So as always, I ask our audience to be a giver of hope. Like, click, and share this show, not because I chase the numbers, that's not me, but because I know there are people in your sphere of influence that need to hear this. They don't know where to find it. Google's a big bad place, and you don't even know what to search for sometimes. So, just do a friendly share. It takes very little time, costs you nothing, but can have such a huge impact on others' lives. Last, I will just wrap up too with asking people to check out Alzheimer's Speaks, all of our free educational resources, tons of variety there for you to listen, watch, download. And again, doesn't cost you anything. You don't need a membership. And our sister company, Dementia Map, where you can find not just our resources, but others around the world that can help you as well. Happy holidays, everyone. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Happy holidays.
This Christmas, give more than just a gift. Give encouragement, inspiration, and joy. In the Crosswalk Holiday Gift Guide, you'll discover a curated collection of meaningful books and devotionals that celebrate faith, family, and the real reason for the season. This Christmas, we invite you to share comfort, quiet, or excitement with each person on your gift list. From beautifully illustrated Bibles and devotionals to novels and picture books, this guide holds the perfect book for every reader, including yourself. So stuff those stories into stockings, wrap collections with care, tuck a book or two into your own nightstand, and join us in celebrating the wonder of reading this Christmas. Explore the Crosswalk Holiday Gift Guide and find something special for everyone on your list. Visit crosswalk.com/gift guide today.